Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Naruto joined the Akatsuki by choice. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The silence was the first betrayal. It seeped into the crater where Konohagakure had once stood, a thick, suffocating blanket that muffled the distant sobs and the groans of the wounded. Dust, fine as powdered bone, coated Naruto Uzumaki's tongue and clung to the torn remnants of his jacket. The air, heavy with the metallic tang of blood and the damp, earthy smell of upturned soil, was a ghost of the vibrant atmosphere that had once filled these streets. He stood at the epicenter of a wound gouged into the world. His body was a symphony of agony. Every muscle screamed, every sinew was stretched taut to the point of snapping. The power of the sage, a placid ocean of natural energy, had receded, leaving behind the jagged shoreline of his own depleted chakra. Beneath that, a deeper, hotter power stirred, a furious, caged beast licking its own wounds, its resentment a low thrum against Naruto's soul. Kurama was quiet, for now, exhausted by the terrifying eruption that had nearly consumed them both. Naruto's gaze drifted. He saw a splintered sign for Ichiraku Ramen, half buried in rubble. He saw the faint outline of the Hokage monument, a distant, silent witness, their carved faces streaked with grime as if they were weeping stone tears. He saw his home, his world unmade. Victory felt like ashes in his mouth. He had won. He had defeated the final path of pain. The monster who had orchestrated this devastation was vanquished. But as he looked at the ruin, the word victory was a meaningless sound, a cruel joke. What had he won? The right to stand alone in a graveyard? A figure materialized beside him, silent as a falling leaf. Hatake Kakashi, his face a mask of exhaustion and relief, one hand clutching his side. Naruto, you did it! The words were strained, filled with a pride that grated on Naruto's raw nerves. Naruto didn't look at him. His blue eyes, normally as bright and boisterous as a summer sky, were now the flat, lifeless blue of a deep-sea abyss. Did what, sensei? His voice was a rasp, gravelly and foreign. Did I save them? He gestured vaguely at the crater, at a team of medics trying desperately to stabilize a shinobi pinned under a collapsed wall. You saved everyone who is left, Kakashi said, his voice softening. You stopped him. You saved the future of the village. The future? Naruto finally turned to face his teacher, and Kakashi flinched. The look in his student's eyes was terrifying. It was an ancient, hollowed-out emptiness, a void where his boundless optimism used to burn. This is the future? Rebuilding on top of bones, waiting for the next pain, the next Akatsuki, the next monster born from this broken world to come and knock it all down again. Naruto, that's not, don't. The word was sharp, a shard of glass. Don't tell me it's not. It's all it's ever been. Before Kakashi could formulate a response, Naruto's sage senses, faint as they were, flared. He felt a signature, a familiar thread of chakra. The source. The puppeteer. He turned, ignoring Kakashi's call, and began to walk. His journey was a pilgrimage through his own failure. Each step was heavy, dragging him through a landscape of personal ghosts. He passed a group of academy students, huddled and crying, their faces smeared with dirt. They looked at him with wide, terrified eyes. Not with admiration. With fear. They saw the monster that had fought the other monster. He was not their hero. He was the other side of the same terrifying coin. He saw Iruka-sensei organizing a triage center, his face grim, shouting orders. For a moment, their eyes met across the devastation. Naruto saw pride, yes, but also a deep, profound sorrow. Iruka's belief had always been a lighthouse for Naruto. Now, it felt like a distant, flickering candle in a hurricane. He kept walking, his focus narrowing, pushing through the psychic noise of the village's collective grief. The path led him out, beyond the main crater, towards a strange, misshapen tree made of paper? It pulsed with a weak but immense chakra. This was it. A woman with blue hair and a single paper flower pinned in her bun stood guard, her amber eyes impassive but radiating a dangerous stillness. Conan. The angel. She didn't move to stop him. She simply watched him approach, her expression unreadable. Naruto pushed past the paper trunk, stepping into the hollow interior. The smell of sickness and decay was overpowering. And there he was, the real pain. The figure was a horror. Emaciated, skeletal, with skin like parchment stretched tight over a rack of bones. His back was a pincushion of black chakra rods, connecting him to a grotesque, wheeled machine that seemed to be the only thing keeping him upright. His hair, a shocking, fiery red, was the only vibrant thing about him, a stark contrast to the pallor of his flesh. And his eyes held the universe. The swirling purple rings of the Rinnegan, godlike and terrible, stared out from the face of a dying man. This was Nagato. So, Naruto's voice echoed in the cramped space. You've come. Naruto didn't answer immediately. He stared, his mind struggling to connect this pathetic, broken creature to the divine, floating figure who had lectured him on justice and passed judgment on his home. Why? Naruto's voice was low, a rumbling growl that vibrated with barely contained fury. I listened to your story. I read Pervy Sage's book. I tried to understand, but I look at you, and I look out there, and I don't understand anything. Nagato's lips, chapped and pale, curled into a faint, bitter smile. You are here. That means you have defeated my 6 paths. It seems the student of Jiraiya has indeed surpassed the master. The name hit Naruto like a physical blow. A vision flared behind his eyes, Jiraiya, laughing, his hand ruffling Naruto's hair after a successful training session, Jiraiya, giving him a thumbs up from the back of the great toad Gamabunta. Jiraiya, sinking into the dark, cold waters of Amigakure, a bloody, broken smile on his face. Don't you dare say his name! Naruto snarled, taking a step forward. The air crackled with his killing intent. Konan tensed outside, ready to intervene, but a faint gesture from Nagato stayed her. His ideals were noble. Nagato coughed, a racking, wet sound. He believed that one day, humans would truly understand one another. He died for that belief. He died for nothing. Naruto roared, the sound raw with a grief so profound it felt like it was tearing him apart from the inside. He went to the Rain Village to understand you. He trusted you, his former student. And you tore him apart, and threw him in the sea. What did his understanding accomplish? What did it save? He wasn't done. The dam of his composure had shattered, and a lifetime of pain was pouring out. And Sasuke! He spat the name. My best friend. The village treated him like a tool, his clan was murdered to keep the peace, and he was driven away by his own pain. We tried to understand him, to bring him back. And where is he now? In the clutches of the Akatsuki. Your organization. The system failed him, and my understanding couldn't save him. His fists were clenched so tight his knuckles were white. His next words were a choked whisper, freighted with the freshest, most agonizing wound of all. And Hinata. Her face flashed in his mind. The way she had stood before the unstoppable Deva path. Her body trembling but her eyes filled with love and resolve, the sickening crunch as she was thrown, broken, to the side. The feeling of his own mind snapping, of the red chakra boiling over, of a promise of vengeance that was the only thing that made sense. She stood up for me. She tried to protect me. And you killed her right in front of my eyes. I felt her die. He knew now, from a quick word with one of the Hyuga medics, that she was alive, barely. But in that moment, the moment that mattered, the moment that had pushed him into the Nine-Tails embrace, she was dead. Her understanding of him, her love, had earned her a gruesome death. He finally looked Nagato straight in the Rinnegan, his own blue eyes burning with a prosecutor's fire. Your pain? You talk to me about pain? My entire life has been pain. I was hated for a beast I never asked for, sealed inside me by a father I never knew. I was alone, despised by the very village I was supposed to protect. But I endured it. I smiled through it. I believed what Pervy Sage taught me. I believed if I just got strong enough, if I just saved enough people, if I just kept trying to understand, that I could break the cycle. He gestured again towards the ruined village, his hand trembling. And this is my reward. This is the fruit of understanding. A crater full of corpses. The people I love, dead or broken, the home I fought for, gone. Jiraiya's philosophy is a lie. It's a beautiful, wonderful fairy tale for children, but we are not in a fairy tale. We are in a slaughterhouse, and your peace, your pain, is the only thing that makes sense anymore." The confession hung in the air, heavy and damning. He had said it. He had given voice to the terrible, seductive logic that had been whispering to him ever since he saw the village destroyed. Nagato was silent for a long time. His Rinnegan seemed to gaze into the deepest parts of Naruto's soul. The bitter smile was gone, replaced by an expression of intense, unnerving focus. He saw it all: the Jinchuriki's burden, the orphan's loneliness, the hero's despair. He saw a mirror of his own past, but a mirror with a terrifying, untamed power staring back. "I did not know," Nagato said, his voice quiet but clear. "I did not know you carried such a burden. Jiraiya-sensei never told us." He paused, a flicker of something. Regret? No, something colder. Analysis. He saw only the bright exterior. He, too, was blinded by his own hope. He leaned forward, the movement causing the machinery to groan. "You speak the truth, Naruto Uzumaki. A truth that took me a lifetime of suffering to comprehend. A truth Yahiko died for." He began to speak, his voice gaining a hypnotic rhythm. He told Naruto of his own childhood, of Konoha shinobi killing his parents by mistake in his own home. He described it not as a plea for sympathy, but as Exhibit A. An example of how even good people, in the name of their village, perpetuate the cycle of hatred. "They were just following orders," Nagato said, his eyes distant. "They were protecting their home. And in doing so, they created me. A new source of hatred." He spoke of Yahiko, of his dream to end war through diplomacy and mutual trust. He described Yahiko's dream with an almost tender reverence, painting a picture of a man much like the Naruto who had first arrived, bright, hopeful, charismatic. And Hanzo the Salamander, a leader of this shinobi world, crushed him. "He used us, tricked us, and forced me to kill my best friend with my own hands." Nagato's gaze fell to his own pale, trembling fingers. "Yahiko died believing in understanding. His death taught me that understanding is a currency the powerful will never accept. They only trade in fear. They only respect power." He looked up, his Rinnegan locking onto Naruto's. "I created the 6 paths of pain to become that power. To become a god. Not out of ego, but out of necessity. The world is a child, Naruto Uzumaki, a child that constantly plays with fire. It will not listen to reason. It will not be swayed by kindness. It must be disciplined. It must be made to feel a pain so overwhelming, so absolute, that the very thought of starting another fire becomes abhorrent. That is my justice. That is my peace." Naruto listened, his anger giving way to a chilling sense of clarity. Every word resonated with the fresh wounds on his soul. The leaders of the world had failed. The system had failed. Hope had failed. "I brought that pain to Konoha," Nagato continued, his voice dropping. "Not for revenge, but as a demonstration. I would have captured you, extracted the 9 tails, and combined its power with the other tailed beasts to create a weapon of ultimate deterrence. A weapon that could obliterate an entire nation in an instant. I would have given that power to the smaller nations, and when the great nations moved to attack, they would know the sting of true pain. After a few such examples, the world would learn fear, and in that fear they would find peace. An enforced, ugly, but lasting peace, a world where no one would have to suffer like he did. A world where a village would never be wiped out. A world where orphans like him, Nagato, and Sasuke would never be created again. The goal was pure, the method was monstrous. And in his current state, it was the only thing that seemed real. But my time is over, Nagato rasped, another cough shaking his frail body. This body, it has paid the price for my power. I came here today prepared to pass my final judgment and then expire. He looked at Naruto, a strange, intense light in his eyes. I was going to use the last of my life force to perform the outer path, samsara of heavenly life technique. To revive the people I killed here today, to prove a point to you, the child of prophecy. A final, foolish gesture of faith in Jiraiya-sensei's ideal. Naruto's heart lurched. Revive them? He could bring them all back. Kakashi-sensei? Shizen-san? All the shinobi, all the civilians? A flicker of the old Naruto sparked within him. Hope. But Nagato saw it, and he crushed it. But what would that accomplish? He asked, his voice sharp again. I would die, and you would be hailed as a hero. You would tell them my story, and for a week, a month, a year, they would contemplate the meaning of pain. But memory fades. The scars would heal. New children would be born who never knew this day, and the cycle would begin anew. Your Hokage would send you on a mission, you would kill an enemy shinobi, and that shinobi's son would swear revenge. Nothing would fundamentally change. My sacrifice would be as meaningless as Yahiko's death. He was right. Naruto knew, with a certainty that was colder and harder than any truth he had ever faced, that Nagato was right. He could already see it. The cheering crowds, the pats on the back, the promotion, the title of Hero of the Leaf. And all the while, the fundamental sickness of the world would remain, festering, waiting to erupt once more. There is another way, Nagato said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. A better way. My plan was not flawed, Naruto Uzumaki. Only the vessel was. I am too weak. I am tied to this machine. I am a ghost clinging to a dying dream. His Rinnegan burned into Naruto. But you are strong. You have the body of an Uzumaki, teeming with life force. You are the perfect Jinchuriki, a master of sage art. You have the charisma of Yahiko and the power that I could only wield through corpses. The prophecy, maybe Jiraiya-sensei misread it. Maybe the child who would bring about a great revolution was not meant to do it with love. Maybe they were meant to do it with an iron fist. He extended a trembling hand. It was not a gesture of aggression, but of offering. The Akatsuki is not destroyed. Its core remains. Konan is loyal to the dream. Our financier is still in the shadows. The tailed beasts are almost all gathered. The plan is in place. All it needs is a new pain. The air went still. Naruto's breath hitched. The offer hung between them, more powerful than any ninjutsu. It was not a temptation of evil, of power for power's sake. It was presented as a burden. A terrible, necessary burden. The chance to truly, finally fix the world. To take all the pain of the world onto himself and become the monster that frightened all other monsters into submission. Naruto's mind became a battlefield. He saw Jiraiya's smiling face. The true measure of a shinobi is not how he lives, but how he dies. He saw the crater. He saw Iruka putting his own headband on him. You're no longer the fox demon. You are Naruto Uzumaki, of the village hidden in the leaves. He saw the terrified faces of the academy children. He saw his father's ghostly image, telling him he believed in him. I know you'll be able to find the answer, but what was the question? He thought the question was how do I stop pain? But that was wrong. The real question, the one Jiraiya had spent his life asking, was how do I stop hatred? And Jiraiya had failed. Minato had failed. The first Hokage had failed. They had all tried to build peace through love, trust, and alliances. And where had it led? To this. To an endless cycle of war, vengeance, and orphaned children. Nagato's path was different. It was ugly. It was tyrannical. It was monstrous, but it was an answer. It was the only answer he had left. The dream of being Hokage, of being loved and accepted by the village, suddenly felt small. Petty. A child's wish for popularity. What good was being the leader of one village in a world determined to tear itself apart? He would be forced to make the same compromises, send his friends on the same deadly missions, create more enemies for the next generation to fight. He would become another Hashirama, another Hiruzen, another link in the chain. No, the chain had to be broken. Not with understanding. With force. He looked at Nagato, at the dying man who had destroyed his world and, in doing so, had shown him the truth of it. His decision was not made in a flash of anger or a fit of despair. It settled upon him with the cold, heavy weight of inevitability. It was the logical conclusion of a lifetime of evidence. All right, Naruto said. The word was quiet. Devoid of emotion. It was the sound of a spirit breaking, and being forged anew into something harder. Nagato's eyes widened slightly. A long, shuddering breath escaped his lips. It was a sound of immense, profound relief. You accept? I accept, Naruto affirmed, his voice gaining a sliver of steel. I accept the burden. I will achieve peace. A real peace. I will finish what you started. Outside, Conan's impassive mask finally cracked. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. It was not the victory she had imagined with Yahiko all those years ago, but it was a victory nonetheless. The dream, twisted as it was, would live on. Conan! Nagato commanded, his voice weak but firm. She entered the paper tree, her gaze fixed on Naruto, a mixture of awe and sorrow in her eyes. Prepare my body. The Akatsuki will need the Rinnegan. She nodded silently, and shimmering sheets of paper began to flow from her sleeves, gently beginning the process of wrapping Nagato's frail form, preserving it. Naruto Uzumaki, Nagato said, his voice fading. Come closer. Naruto knelt before the dying man. He felt no hatred for him now. Only a strange, grim kinship. They were two sides of the same coin, forged in the same fires of loss. The Rinne rebirth would have been a fool's hope, Nagato whispered, his breath ghosting across Naruto's face. This is a true legacy. My chakra is almost gone, but I have enough for one last transfer. Not power, but knowledge. My pain. My resolve. Let it be the foundation upon which you build your own. Nagato's hand, cold and bony, rested on Naruto's head. A surge of energy, unlike any Naruto had ever felt, flooded his mind. It wasn't the violent violation of the Nine-Tails chakra. It was a deluge of information, of sensation. He felt the terror of a child watching his parents die. He felt the hope of a young man forming a group to save his country. He felt the agony of plunging a kunai into his best friend's heart. He felt decades of crippling pain, of being tethered to a machine, of seeing the world only through the eyes of puppets. He felt Nagato's unwavering, fanatical conviction that his path was the only way. The torrent of memory and emotion lasted only a second, but it aged him 1,000 years. When it receded, something inside him had been permanently altered. The last vestiges of his boyish idealism had been scoured away, replaced by the cold, hard certainty of his new purpose. Nagato's hand fell away, his body slumping. His eyes, the divine Rinnegan, were cloudy and dull. With his final, ragged breath, he gave his successor his new title. From this day forward, you are the world's new pain. The life left him. Nagato, the man who had called himself a god, was dead. Naruto remained kneeling for a long moment. The silence in the paper tree was absolute. Then, slowly, he stood up. Conan watched him, her breath held. His posture was the same, but his presence was utterly different. The familiar, explosive warmth he had once radiated was gone, replaced by an aura of immense, compressed power, as cold and still as a winter night. He turned. His blue eyes, once so expressive, were now calm, calculating, and chillingly empty. They held the weight of the knowledge Nagato had given him, the pain of a world he now intended to save from itself. He took a step out of the paper tree, back into the open air of his ruined home. The first drops of a cold rain began to fall, pattering against the rubble. He saw Kakashi in the distance, arguing with Gamabunta, likely planning how to approach him. He saw Sakura, her pink hair a small splash of color in the gray ruin, her face a mask of worry. He saw his friends, his bonds. He turned his back on them. He turned his back on the Hokage monument. He turned his back on the splintered sign of the ramen shop. He turned his back on Konohagakure. He was Naruto Uzumaki no longer. He was a symbol. An idea. A promise of pain to come. And his new path, the pariah's path, was just beginning. He walked, with Conan at his side, towards the falling rain and the waiting red clouds. The journey to Amagekyo was a silent, disorienting blur. Conan, a figure of stoic grace, enveloped Naruto in a flurry of paper that swirled into a great, origami crane. There was no running, no leaping through trees, none of the familiar rhythms of a leaf shinobi on the move. There was only the whisper of paper wings against the air, and the ground receding into a featureless map below. Naruto sat rigidly within the paper construct, the wind whipping his hair. He didn't look back. He couldn't. To look back would be to see the smudge of smoke that was once his home, to feel the phantom pull of 1,000 bonds he had just deliberately severed. He could feel it anyway, a dull ache in his chest that had nothing to do with his recent battle. It was as if his entire chakra network, so attuned to the life force of his village, was experiencing a phantom limb. He could almost feel Kakashi's weary signature, Sakura's frantic worry, the steady, earthly presence of the Nara clan, the fiery spark of the Akimichi. All of it was fading, stretching thin like a thread pulled taut to its breaking point. He focused instead on the woman in front of him. Conan's back was straight, her expression unreadable as she guided their paper vessel. She was the sole inheritor of Nagato's will, and she had passed that legacy to him. She was his guide, his subordinate, and his keeper, all at once. "The rain in Amigekyo never stops," she said, her voice soft but clear over the rush of the wind. She didn't turn to look at him. Nagato made it so. He used his chakra to sense every single person who entered or left the village through the rain itself. It was a perfect surveillance network. Naruto remained silent, processing this. A jutsu of that scale, maintained indefinitely. It was the kind of power a Kage could only dream of. But it was more than that. Conan continued, a hint of melancholy coloring her tone. The rain was his grief. The sky of Amigekyo wept for him, for Yahiko, for the dream we lost. He wanted the entire country to feel the sorrow he carried. Naruto thought of the oppressive atmosphere Nagato's paths had carried. He hadn't just wielded pain as a weapon, he had lived in it, breathed it, and made his entire nation do the same. Naruto's own pain felt like a raging bonfire, hot and all-consuming. Nagato's felt like a cold, bottomless ocean. Naruto had chosen to drown in it. As they flew, the landscape below shifted from the lush green of the Land of Fire to a more rugged, waterlogged terrain. The air grew thick and heavy with moisture. Soon, Naruto could see it, a sprawling, vertical city stabbed into the sky, a collection of colossal, metallic towers that seemed to scrape at the perpetually gray clouds. This was Amigekyo, the village hidden in the rain. Their paper crane descended, not towards a grand gate, but into a shadowed alley between two towering skyscrapers. The moment they touched the ground, the paper dissolved, leaving them standing on wet pavement. The promised rain was immediate and unrelenting. It wasn't the gentle, life-giving rain of Konoha's spring showers. This was a cold, miserable, industrial drizzle that tasted of rust and sorrow. It soaked his tattered jacket instantly, plastering his blonde hair to his scalp. The city was a labyrinth of steel and concrete. Pipes, thick as pythons, snaked along the walls of buildings, dripping with condensation. The streets were unnervingly empty, save for the occasional cloaked figure who would press themselves into a doorway as Conan and Naruto passed, their faces hidden by wide-brimmed hats and breathing masks. There was no laughter, no commerce, no life. Just the monotonous drumming of the rain and the distant, mournful hum of unseen machinery. It was a city holding its breath. Naruto activated his sage mode, just for a second. The natural energy here was weak, sluggish, as if it were being suppressed. But the chakra of the city itself, it was a vast, singular entity, a network of sorrow that pulsed with every drop of rain. He could feel Nagato's lingering presence everywhere. This city wasn't just Nagato's fortress, it was an extension of his body, his soul. And now, it was Naruto's inheritance. Conan led him to the tallest of the towers, a structure so high its peak was lost in the low-hanging clouds. The entrance was unmarked, a simple metal door that slid open with a hiss at her approach. Inside, the silence was even more profound. They ascended in a stark, metal elevator, the only sound the quiet hum of its ascent. The top floor was a vast, circular room. The outer wall was a single, curved pane of reinforced glass, offering a panoramic, rain-streaked view of the weeping city. The room was Spartan. In the center stood a single, high-backed chair, intricately carved and foreboding. Nagato's throne. It was empty. This was his chamber, Conan said, gesturing to the throne. From here, he controlled the 6 paths. He was the unseen god of this nation. Naruto walked towards the window, placing a hand against the cool, vibrating glass. He looked down at the city Nagato had built, the prison he had ruled. He felt no triumph, only the crushing weight of his new reality. You said this started as a dream for peace, Naruto said, his voice flat. Tell me, Conan's gaze softened. For the first time, Naruto saw past the stoic Akatsuki enforcer to the woman who had lost everything. There were 3 of us, she began, her voice a low murmur. Orphans of the last great war. Me, Nagato, and Yahiko. She spoke Yahiko's name with a unique reverence, a mixture of love and pain. Yahiko, he was like you. So much like you, it hurts to see. He was loud, charismatic, and fiercely determined. He dreamed of a world where the great nations wouldn't use our home as their personal battlefield. He believed in peace through understanding, just like Jiraiya-sensei. She explained how Yahiko had formed the original Akatsuki. Not as a mercenary group, but as a pacifist movement. They gathered followers, fellow shinobi tired of the endless war, and their influence grew. They sought to create peace without violence. It was a beautiful dream, she whispered, a ghost of a smile on her lips. But this world does not reward beautiful dreams. Hanzo the salamander, the leader of this village at the time, saw our growing influence as a threat. He allied with Danzo Shimura of your own village, and laid a trap. Her expression hardened. He captured me and gave Nagato an ultimatum, kill Yahiko, or I would die. Yahiko, he didn't hesitate. To save me, and to prevent Nagato from having to make that choice, he threw himself onto Nagato's kunai. Naruto flinched, the image all too easy to imagine. It was the same selfless, painful calculus of a true shinobi. Yahiko's death broke Nagato. His belief and understanding died with him. In that moment of absolute pain, he fully awakened his Rinnegan and summoned the Geto statue, slaughtering Hanzo's men. From that day on, the Akatsuki was reborn. Nagato decided that if the world would not understand peace, he would force it upon them through pain. He became a god of vengeance to protect a dream of peace. She turned to face Naruto fully, her amber eyes intense. I followed Nagato because I loved them both. But his path was one of endless darkness. When you spoke to him, when you showed him your own pain and your refusal to accept the world as it is, I saw a chance. A new path. You have Yahiko's light, his spirit, but you have accepted the necessity of Nagato's resolve. You can wield his power without being consumed by his despair. You are the synthesis, the true inheritor of our dream. Before Naruto could respond to the heavy burden of her words, a voice, slick and oily, echoed from the shadows of the room. Fascinating. A new vessel for the will of pain. And this one comes preloaded with the 9 tails. How wonderfully efficient! From the floor itself, a figure emerged, splitting into 2 distinct halves. It was Zetsu. The white half, with a goofy, swirling pattern on its face, grinned amiably. The black half, its face a grim snarl, regarded Naruto with cold, yellow eyes. The Kyubi Jinchuriki, walking right into our headquarters. White Zetsu chirped. I told you he was interesting. Silence. Black Zetsu rasped, his gaze slithering over Naruto like an insect. He carries the stench of sage toads and the leaf. But beneath it, yes. The resolve is there. Hardened. Changed. He seemed to be speaking more to himself than to Naruto. This will be reported. Naruto's eyes narrowed. He remembered Zetsu from the periphery of Akatsuki encounters. The spy. The scout. He felt an instinctual revulsion towards the creature. It was unnatural, its chakra signature alien and wrong. I am the new leader of this organization, Naruto stated, his voice leaving no room for argument. You will report to me, White Zetsu giggled. Of course. Bossy, just like the last one. Black Zetsu merely offered a slow, unsettling blink. Your will is the Akatsuki's will. For now. With that cryptic addendum, the 2 halves began to sink back into the floor, melting into the shadows as if they were never there. The interaction left a foul taste in Naruto's mouth. Zetsu was not an ally. It was a tool, and a duplicitous one at that. A new presence announced itself, not with a creepy appearance, but with a distortion of space. A swirling vortex materialized near the center of the room, and from it, a man in a spiral orange mask and a black cloak tumbled out, landing in a heap. Whoa, Dizzy! A high-pitched, childish voice declared. Toby is here! Toby heard there was a new leader. Is it you? Are you Naruto-kun? Can Toby be your best friend? Naruto stared at the masked figure. This was Toby, the buffoon who had partnered with Deidara. The one Kakashi's team had encountered. It was impossible to reconcile this childish oaf with the grim reality of the Akatsuki. His presence was so absurdly out of place that it was disorienting. Stand up, Naruto commanded, his tone icy. Ooh, scary voice. Toby scrambled to his feet, dusting himself off theatrically. He cocked his head, his single visible eye-hole focused on Naruto. So, you really beat Pain-senpai? Wow, you must be super strong. Does this mean you get to tell everyone what to do? Does this mean Toby gets more candy? Naruto's jaw tightened. This was a mockery. The time for games is over. Nagato is dead. His will is now mine. You will follow my orders, or you will be removed. Okay. Toby is a good boy. Toby will follow your orders, Leader-sama. He gave a jaunty, ridiculous salute. Yes, a different voice thought, from the cold, dark place behind the mask. Follow your orders. Lead my new pawn exactly where I need him to go. Obito Uchiha, behind the facade of Toby, was experiencing a wave of triumphant ecstasy that was almost overwhelming. It was perfect. More perfect than he could have possibly planned. The Kyuubi Jinchuriki hadn't been captured, he had converted. He had willingly embraced the very philosophy of despair that Obito had so carefully cultivated in Nagato. The boy's nihilistic rant, which Setsu had reported verbatim, was music to his ears. Let him play at being a god, Obito thought, his Sharingan spinning unseen behind the mask. Let him think he is forging a new path. His forced peace requires the power of all nine-tailed beasts. He will gather them for me. He will walk the path I have laid, believing it is his own. And when the time is right, when the ghetto statue is full and he is at his most powerful and arrogant, I will take it all. The nine tails, the other beasts, Nagato's Rinnegan, everything. The child of prophecy will be the ultimate sacrifice to power the Eye of the Moon. It is the most beautiful irony. Toby promises to be the bestest subordinate ever. The masked man chirped, his voice betraying none of the cosmic betrayal he was plotting. Naruto simply stared, his instincts screaming that something was profoundly wrong with this picture, but he couldn't put his finger on it. The man was either a complete idiot, or the greatest actor in the world, for now, he was a necessary piece of the puzzle. A heavy footstep echoed from the elevator, and the final remaining member arrived. The figure that emerged was immense, casting a long shadow into the room. Kisame Hashigaki, the monster of the hidden mist, stood there, his massive, bandaged sword Samahata resting on his shoulder. His gills flared slightly as he breathed the humid air, and a wide, predatory grin split his blue-skinned face, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth. Unlike the others, there was no subterfuge in Kisame's gaze. Only a frank, analytical respect. He looked from Naruto to the empty throne and back again. So the rumors are true. Kisame's deep, rumbling voice filled the room. The fox cub has devoured the god. I'm impressed, Kisame. Konan acknowledged with a slight nod. Kisame's grin widened. He walked forward, his presence a palpable wave of raw, murderous power. He stopped a respectful distance from Naruto, his eyes scanning the boy's frame. He could feel the dregs of sage chakra, the volcanic power of the Kyuubi held in check, and something new, a cold, hard resolve that hadn't been there when they'd last seen him. I heard what you did to Konoha, Kisame said, his tone devoid of judgment. And I heard why. You turned your back on the lies of the village. Good. It takes a strong man to see the truth. Of all the welcomes, this was the one that resonated most with Naruto's current state. Kisame wasn't fawning, mocking, or analyzing. He was empathizing. You know what it's like to live a lie in service to a village, Kisame continued, his hand patting the hilt of Samahata. I slaughtered my own comrades in the Cipher Division to protect our codes. I killed my own master when I learned he was selling that information. I did everything my village asked of me, only to realize that the entire system was built on deceit and betrayal. The truth of the shinobi world is a joke. He pointed a blue finger at Naruto. You see it now. You're not a hero of the leaf. You're a Jinchuriki. A weapon. They cheer for you when you win, but the moment you falter, the moment you show your teeth, they fear you. They would put you in a cage if they could. You chose to break the cage yourself. I respect that. This was a kindred spirit, Naruto realized with a jolt. A monster who had seen the hypocrisy of the world and chosen to carve his own path. There was no warmth in Kisame's camaraderie, only the cold respect of one predator for another. It was a foundation Naruto could understand. The Akatsuki has a new purpose, Naruto said, his voice steady. Nagato's plan will be seen through. But it will be my will that guides it. Humph. As long as there's enough blood to be spilled and a big enough ocean to swim in, I'll follow whoever holds the leash. Kisame rumbled. Samahata wriggled in its bandages, emitting a low chittering sound, as if in agreement. The pieces were in place. The spy, the puppet master, the shark, and the angel. This was his new team. A collection of monsters, traitors, and broken souls. Konan stepped forward, her hands held out. In one, she held a folded black cloak, identical to her own, emblazoned with swirling red clouds. In the other, she held a single, simple ring. The Akatsuki cloak, she said, her voice formal. A symbol of your separation from the world. A declaration that you live in the shadows, for a higher purpose. Naruto took the cloak. The fabric was heavy, dense, and cool to the touch. It felt like it absorbed the very light around it. He unfolded it, letting his own tattered, orange and black jacket fall to the floor in a heap. He shrugged the heavy cloak on. The fit was perfect. As he pulled the high collar up, he felt a profound sense of severance. The orange jumpsuit, the symbol of the outcast who desperately craved attention, was gone. In its place was the uniform of the outcast who commanded fear. And your ring, Konan continued, presenting the small object on her palm. It was a dark, purplish-gray band, with a single kanji engraved on its face, Gyoku, meaning jewel or sphere. Nagato wore the ring for 0. Yours is the jewel, to represent the nine-tailed jewel you hold within you. It is the central piece around which the others will gather. The rings allow us to communicate and coordinate. When you wear it, you are one of us. Naruto took the ring. It was cold. He stared at the kanji, then slowly, deliberately, slid it onto the thumb of his right hand. The moment it settled into place, a bizarre sensation prickled his senses. It was a faint thrum of chakra, a ghostly network connecting him to the others. He could feel the cool, crisp presence of Konan, the deep, churning signature of Kisame, the bizarre, unsettling non-chakra of Tobi, and the plant-like essence of Zetsu. He could even feel the faint, lingering echoes of the dead, Sasori, Deidara, Kakuzu, Haiden, and Nagato himself. He was now a part of this macabre fellowship. Konan turned and addressed the others, her voice ringing with authority. Nagato's will has been passed. The Akatsuki has a new sky. Before you stands our new leader. He is the new pain. Tobi clapped his hands together with glee. Kisame gave a sharp-toothed grin. Zetsu remained unseen, but Naruto could feel its cloying observation. His initiation was complete. He was no longer Naruto Uzumaki of the Hidden Leaf. He was Pain, leader of the Akatsuki. He turned back to the great window, looking down at the city that was his new domain, his new responsibility. The constant drumming of the rain was a mournful dirge, a reminder of the sorrow that had birthed this new era. It was a sorrow he would end. He closed his eyes, drawing on the vast ocean of chakra within him. He didn't reach for Kurama's violent power, nor the placid energy of the sage toads. He reached for his own, the immense reserves of an Uzumaki, and pushed it outwards. He connected with the chakra that permeated the very air of Amigekure, the massive, grieving jutsu Nagato had maintained for years. He felt the city's pain. He felt its grief. But he did not commiserate with it. He commanded it. Enough. The word was a silent decree in his own mind, but it carried the force of a tidal wave. He pushed his will into the weeping sky. Outside the tower, the impossible happened. The rain, which had fallen without cease for years, began to falter. The steady drumming became a sporadic patter. The thick, gray clouds, which had smothered the city in a perpetual twilight, began to churn. Then, slowly, they started to part. On the streets below, the few cloaked citizens stopped dead in their tracks, looking up. AIM shinobi on patrol froze on the rooftops. For the first time in their memory, the rain stopped. A single, pale, watery ray of sunlight broke through the clouds, striking the side of the central tower like a divine spotlight. It was a weak, anemic light, but it was light nonetheless. The city, for a brief, stunned moment, was silent. The oppressive weeping had ceased. Inside the throne room, Kisame's eyes were wide. Tobi, for once, was silent. Conan stared, tears welling in her eyes and tracing silent paths down her cheeks. Nagato had made the sky weep with his grief. Naruto had commanded it to stop with his will. Naruto opened his eyes and stared at the sliver of sun touching his new city. He felt no joy, no satisfaction. The light felt foreign, cold. He had brought the sun to the city of endless rain, a symbolic gesture of a new era. But within him, the warmth had been extinguished, replaced by the cold, clear light of purpose. The path was set. The work had begun. A month had passed since Naruto Uzumaki had turned his back on the sun. In its place, he had inherited a kingdom of perpetual twilight and weeping steel. The sunlight he had commanded on his first day in Amigakure had been a fleeting, theatrical gesture. The clouds had soon gathered again, not with the oppressive, grieving weight of Nagato's chakra, but with the natural, grim mood of the land itself. The city remained a place of shadows, and Naruto was beginning to understand that it suited his new purpose. His days fell into a rigid, ascetic routine. He would spend hours in Nagato's former throne room, not sitting on the throne, it felt like a tomb, but standing before the great window, trying to feel the pulse of his new domain. Conan would bring him scrolls, vast repositories of knowledge Nagato had hoarded, advanced sealing jutsu, theories on chakra nature manipulation, and most importantly, the rudimentary exercises for mastering the Rinnegan. He had not yet dared to implant Nagato's eyes. The thought of putting those terrible, divine dijitsu into his own skull was daunting. It felt like a final, irreversible violation. Conan, sensing his hesitation, had simply preserved the eyes, telling him, "The power will be there when your vessel is ready to contain it." For now, he focused on what he could control. He meditated, not to connect with nature as Jiraiya had taught him, but to wrestle with the beast in his gut. Kurama had become a sullen, silent partner in his self-imposed exile. The great fox no longer raged. Instead, it watched him with a cynical, ancient intelligence. During his meditations, they would sit in the vast, watery chamber of his subconscious, the seal on the cage still glowing, but the atmosphere changed. "So this is your grand plan, Kit?" Kurama's voice would rumble, shaking the very foundations of Naruto's mind. "To become a bigger cage for a bigger world? You've traded a village of ingrates for a den of murderers and called it progress." Naruto would never answer. He would simply focus on his own chakra, forcing it into new, colder patterns, practicing the formation of the black rods he'd seen Nagato use, trying to replicate their chakra-disrupting properties. He was building a new arsenal, piece by piece, burying the loud, boisterous shinobi he had been under layers of cold, hard pragmatism. The hollow feeling from his victory over pain had not subsided. It had become a permanent resident in his chest, a cold stone where his heart used to be. He had expected his choice to bring clarity, a sense of righteous purpose. Instead, it had brought only a profound, unending silence. The cheers he had once craved were gone, replaced by the hushed whispers of AIM shinobi who looked at him with a mixture of fear and awe. He was their leader, their god, and he had never been more alone. It was on one such gray morning that Conan entered the throne room, her paper wings rustling softly before dissolving into her cloak. She carried a single scroll. "We have a problem," she stated, her tone all business. "Our intelligence network in the land of Earth has been compromised. For the past 2 months, sensitive information, safe house locations, courier routes, financial transfer points, has been leaking directly to the Iwagakure Tsuchikage's office." Naruto turned from the window, his blue eyes sharp and focused. "We've traced the source," Conan said, unrolling the scroll on a low table. It showed a map and a rough sketch of a man's face. "His name is Kageyama Ryota, a former Iwagakure Jonin, a specialist in Earth-style ninjutsu and long-range communication jutsus. He went rogue 3 years ago, offering his services as an information broker. We hired him to monitor Iwa's movements. It seems he decided to play both sides. Naruto stared at the sketch. A stern-looking man in his late 30s, with a prominent scar across his nose. A face that could have belonged to any number of shinobi he had passed in the leaf. His betrayal threatens our entire operation in the north. He has made himself a liability. The words came out sounding like Nagato's, cold and analytical. It was a voice he was still getting used to. He must be neutralized, Conan affirmed. His knowledge of our methods is too dangerous to be left in play. This will be your first official mission as leader. A demonstration of your resolve. Naruto nodded slowly. It wasn't a bijou hunt. It was pest control. But he knew it was more than that. It was a test. Tobi, Zetsu, Kisame, they were watching, waiting to see if the hero of the leaf had truly died in that crater. Who am I taking? Naruto asked. A childish voice suddenly piped up from behind the throne, making Naruto's jaw clench. Tobi phased up through the floor, waving his arms enthusiastically. Ooh! Ooh! Tobi wants to go! Tobi and Leader-sama can be the bestest team ever. You will remain here, Naruto said, his voice dropping a degree colder. The oaf's presence grated on him, a constant, idiotic counterpoint to the grim reality he was trying to embrace. Kisame will accompany you, Conan stated, ignoring Tobi's dejected slump. His skills are suited for a direct confrontation, and his loyalty to the Akatsuki's goals is absolute. He will provide effective support. Naruto understood the unspoken message. Kisame was not just support. He was the yardstick. A brutal, unflinching monster who would measure Naruto against his own bloody standards. As if summoned, the heavy scrape of a bandaged weapon preceded the man himself. Kisame Hashigaki ducked through the doorway, his massive frame filling it completely. Samahata was slung over his shoulder, and his sharp-toothed grin was firmly in place. I hear we're going hunting, he rumbled, his gills flaring in the humid air. His eyes, small and predatory, fixed on Naruto. About time. This city is too dry for my taste, even with the rain. I need to get my blade wet. Your mission, Conan said, her voice addressing them both, is to locate Kageyama Ryota, capture him, and retrieve any and all information he has stored. His last known location is in the Rocky Highlands on the border of the Land of Earth. He is a skilled and cautious shinobi. Do not underestimate him. Capture him? Kisame's grin widened, showing more teeth. Is that a suggestion, or a requirement? Naruto met the shark man's gaze, his own expression unyielding. He is to be captured alive. I want to know who he was selling to and what he told them. His mind is more valuable than his corpse. Kisame chuckled, a low, rasping sound. Practical. I like it. Samahata prefers a living meal anyway. The bandaged sword on his back wriggled, emitting a low, hungry chitter. Then it's settled, Naruto said, pulling his new cloak tighter around himself. We leave immediately. The journey out of Amagekyo was swift. They moved on foot, a concession to the rugged terrain that lay ahead. For hours they traveled in silence, two crimson clouds floating through a world of gray rock and brown earth. The silence was different from the contemplative quiet of traveling with Jiraiya or the tense quiet of a mission with Team 7. This was a heavy, predatory silence, the quiet of two hunters stalking their prey. It was Kisame who finally broke it. You're different from Itachi-san, he said, not looking at Naruto, his eyes scanning the horizon. The name, Itachi, sent a jolt through Naruto. Sasuke's brother. The man who had set Sasuke on his path of revenge. Another product of Konoha's peace. Itachi-san was quiet, Kisame elaborated, his voice a low rumble. But his was a knowing silence. He'd already seen the end of the world and decided it wasn't worth talking about. Your silence, it's loud. You're fighting with it. Naruto's eyes narrowed. I don't know what you're talking about, Kisame laughed. See? That's what I mean. Itachi-san would have just kept walking. You felt the need to deny it. He shifted Samahata on his shoulder. I was his partner for a long time. I learned to read the different kinds of quiet. I also learned that every man who joins this organization does so because he saw a truth the rest of the world refuses to acknowledge. Itachi-san's truth was that he would bear any sin for his village, even destroying his own clan. My truth was that the village itself was the original sin. Nagato's truth was that pain was the only universal language. He finally turned his head, his small, dark eyes pinning Naruto. So, what's your truth, leader? The one that made you throw away a hero's crown to wear this cloak? Naruto thought of Nagato's words, of the crater, of the endless cycle. He repeated the philosophy that had become his mantra. My truth is that attachments, to a person, a village, an ideal, are the source of all conflict. They create fear of loss, and that fear breeds hatred. To create true peace, the cycle of hatred must be shattered by a power so absolute that the very idea of fighting becomes unthinkable. I will become that power. It sounded strong. It sounded resolved. But as he said it, the faces of his own attachments flashed through his mind. Irika's proud smile, Kakashi's weary but fond eye smile, Sakura's determined face, Hinata's shy courage, Jiraiya's booming laugh. Each face was a phantom pain, a testament to the lie he was trying to live. Kisame seemed to consider his answer. A world without attachments, he mused. It would be a quiet world. Efficient. Samahata would probably starve. He grinned. It's a fine philosophy, but philosophies are clean. The world is messy. Attachments are like weeds. You can cut them down, but the roots run deep. They always grow back. Then I'll rip out the roots, Naruto said, his voice harder than he intended. You're a terrible liar, Kit. Kurama's voice echoed in his mind, laced with dark amusement. You're trying to convince him, but you're really trying to convince yourself. This walking fish has more honesty in his fins than you do in your entire body. He knows he's a monster. You're just a boy playing dress-up in a monster's clothes. Naruto pushed the voice down, focusing on the path ahead. The land was becoming harsher, the ground a jagged mess of upturned rock and deep gullies. This was the territory of an Earth-style master. We're close, Naruto said, stopping and closing his eyes. He drew in the natural energy around him. It was thin and sharp here, not like the vibrant, living energy of Mount Myaboku. The orange pigmentation of sage mode appeared around his eyes. The world snapped into focus with hypersensitive clarity. He could feel the flow of chakra for miles, the faint signatures of small animals skittering underground, the hum of the wind, and there, a thin, almost imperceptible thread of chakra woven into the rock itself. A tripwire. He's laid traps, Naruto announced, opening his eyes. An extensive warning network. Kisame's grin was predatory. Good. A little sport before the main event. They proceeded with a new level of caution. Naruto's sage mode was the perfect counter to Kageyama's subterfuge. He pointed out chakra-laced stones, pressure plates hidden under thin layers of dust, and seals that were designed to trigger rockfalls. They moved like ghosts through a minefield. Their first real obstacle was a narrow canyon. As they entered, the walls on either side of them shimmered, and two massive figures of rock and earth rose from the ground. Stone golems, each 10 meters tall, their bodies covered in jagged, sharp edges. They moved with a ground-shaking heaviness, their sole purpose to crush whatever lay between them. I'll take the left, Kisame said, his voice filled with glee. He unslung Samahata, pulling away the bandages to reveal the living, scaled surface of the great sword. It quivered with anticipation, its small mouth opening and closing. The golem on the right lumbered towards Naruto. He didn't move. He simply held up a hand, a swirling sphere of pure chakra forming in his palm with practiced ease. This was not the desperate, two-handed Rasengan of his youth. This was a weapon, formed with the casual confidence of a master. The golem swung a massive stone fist, and Naruto met it. Rasengan! The impact wasn't an explosion. It was a grinding, focused demolition. The sphere of rotating chakra drilled into the golem's arm, shattering the magically bound rock and earth, sending dust and pebbles flying. Naruto's feet dug into the ground as he pushed, forcing his attack up the creature's arm and into its torso. With a final, explosive pulse of chakra, the entire golem crumbled into a heap of rubble. He glanced to his left. Kisame's approach was less elegant but no less effective. He had met his golem's attack with Samahata, and the scaled blade was literally eating the chakra that held the construct together. The golem was dissolving, its form sloughing off in great chunks as Kisame laughed, the blade writhing in his grip like a happy pet. "Not bad, leader," Kisame grunted, as the last of his golem fell apart. "You're more than just a loud mouth and a big ball of foxfire." Naruto ignored the backhanded compliment, his sage senses already spreading out again, searching. "He's channeling chakra from a single point. A cave system, northeast of here. He's cornered." They moved quickly, the traps becoming more desperate and hastily constructed. It was clear Kageyama knew his defenses were being dismantled. They arrived at the mouth of a large cave, a dark maw in the side of a cliff face. A heavy, reinforced stone door blocked the entrance. "Allow me," Kisame said. He swung Samahata. The blade, gorged on the chakra from the golems, slammed into the stone door. Instead of shattering it, the scales on the sword scraped against it, peeling away the chakra that reinforced the rock. With a groan, the door crumbled into dust. They stepped inside. The air was cool and damp. The cave was a single, large chamber, lit by glowing crystals embedded in the walls. In the center of the chamber stood Kageyama Ryota. He was exactly as the sketch had depicted, his face pale with fear but his eyes burning with defiance. "Akatsuki," he spat, his hands already forming seals. "You found me. But you won't take me. There is nowhere left to run, Kageyama-san," Naruto said, his voice echoing in the cavern. "Your betrayal has cost our organization time and resources. You will repay that debt." "Repay it?" Kageyama laughed, a harsh, desperate sound. "You think this was about money? Iwagakure has my family. My wife, my son. They were taken, held hostage. I was told if I didn't feed them your secrets, my family would be executed. What would you do?" The words hit Naruto with the force of a physical blow. What would you do? He saw his own desperate battle to save Sasuke. He saw Kakashi's willingness to die for him and Sakura. He saw Hinata throwing herself in front of pain. He saw Jiraiya infiltrating Amigakure alone for the sake of the leaf. Everything he had ever done, everything he had ever respected, had been for the sake of protecting others. For attachments, Kisame scoffed beside him. A pathetic excuse. You chose a side. You chose wrong. You don't understand. Kageyama roared, slamming his palms on the ground. Earth style, rock lodging. The floor of the cave churned. Spikes of razor-sharp rock, each the size of a kunai, erupted from the ground, shooting towards them from all angles. Kisame swung Samahata in a wide arc, shattering the spikes, while Naruto, with the fluid grace of his sage mode, weaved between them without being touched. Before the assault even finished, Kageyama formed another seal. Earth-style, stone casket. The walls of the cave seemed to fold inwards, huge slabs of rock converging on Naruto and Kisame, intending to crush them into paste. Futile! Kisame roared. Water-style, great shark bomb jutsu! Kisame inhaled and then expelled a colossal amount of water that instantly took the shape of a massive shark. The water shark slammed into the converging walls, the sheer pressure and volume blasting the rock slabs apart in an explosion of water and stone. While Kisame held the cave from collapsing, Naruto saw his opening. Kageyama was focused on his large-scale jutsu, his guard momentarily down. Naruto flickered. In an instant, he closed the distance, a Sage Mode-enhanced shadow clone appearing behind the rogue Nin, while the real Naruto appeared in front. Kageyama spun, throwing a punch at the real Naruto, who caught it effortlessly. The clone behind him struck not with a fist, but with 2 fingers jabbed into the back of Kageyama's neck. A jolt of chakra disrupted the man's nervous system, and he collapsed, paralyzed. It was over. Fast. Brutal. Efficient. Naruto stood over the gasping, twitching form of their target. He had won. He had proven himself. But the man's words echoed in his head. I did it for them. He saw not a traitor, but a father. A husband. A man cornered by a world that forced impossible choices. The cold stone in his chest seemed to crack. He had a clear shot to end it. A kunai to the throat. A simple Rasengan to the chest. It would be merciful. It would be what pain would do. He hesitated. His hand, poised to deliver a final blow or apply a sealing tag, froze for a fraction of a second. His mind was a maelstrom. The ruins of Konoha. Nagato's dying words. Jiraiya's smile. Kageyama's desperate plea. It was only a heartbeat, a single, stolen moment of indecision, but in the world of monsters, a heartbeat is an eternity. Kisame saw it. His predatory grin didn't falter, but his eyes narrowed. He saw the flicker of the old Naruto, the empathetic boy, warring with the cold mantle of pain. He didn't intervene. This was the true test. The image of the crater, of Hinata's broken form, of Jiraiya sinking into the depths, he forced them to the forefront of his mind. These were the fruits of compassion. This was the result of hesitation. He would not make that mistake again. The cold wall slammed back down, harder this time, reinforced with fresh pain. His expression became a mask of pure, empty resolve. He wouldn't kill him. His mind was still valuable. Instead, he reached into his cloak and pulled out a sealing tag, slapping it onto Kageyama's forehead. The man's eyes rolled back, and he went limp, unconscious. Kageyama lay defeated, his body twitching from the nerve strike. Naruto stood over him, breathing heavily, the adrenaline fading to be replaced by that familiar, gnawing emptiness. Please! A weak, choked voice came from the ground. Kageyama, though paralyzed, was still conscious. Tears streamed from his eyes, mixing with the dust on his face. My son, his name is Kaido. He has a lung sickness. The money from IWA was for medicine, the only medicine that works. Without it, he won't, please. The plea was not a strategic gambit. It was the raw, unfiltered agony of a parent. It was the most human sound Naruto had heard in a month, and it was like a poisoned dart to his soul. Before Naruto could even process a response, Kisame stepped forward, his huge shadow falling over the broken man. Samahata rested on his shoulder, humming softly. Attachments make you weak, Kisame stated, his voice a flat, didactic rumble. He wasn't speaking to Kageyama. He was speaking to Naruto. His love for his family made him a traitor. His fear for their safety made him careless. Your flicker of sympathy for that love. He glanced at Naruto, his sharp eyes missing nothing. Almost made you fail this mission. The very thing he thinks makes him a man is the reason he is here, helpless at your feet. That is the first and most important lesson of this world, leader. Love is a liability. Compassion is a vulnerability. The path you've chosen has no room for either. Kisame prodded Kageyama with the hilt of his sword. His son will probably die. His wife may be executed by IWA for his failure. His story ends in tragedy, all because he was attached. Remember that. Every word was a hammer blow, shattering the last, fragile remnants of Naruto's old self. Kisame wasn't being cruel. He was being honest. He was teaching. This was the curriculum of the Akatsuki. Naruto stared down at Kageyama's tear-streaked face, and he felt nothing. He had to feel nothing. He walled off the empathy, encased the pity in stone, and buried it deep inside him. He slung the unconscious shinobi over his shoulder. The man was surprisingly light. Just a sack of flesh and bone, and a liability to be interrogated. The mission is complete, Naruto said, his voice a monotone. Let's go. The journey back to Amigekyo was even quieter than the journey out. The silence was now a shared understanding. Naruto had been tested, he had faltered, and he had corrected. Kisame seemed to offer a silent, grim approval. But inside Naruto, a war had been lost. He had done it. He had suppressed his own nature, ignored a man's desperate plea, and treated him as a simple asset. He had acted as pain would have. The victory was absolute. And it felt like a profound, irreversible defeat. He kept seeing the face of a boy he never met, Kaido, gasping for air. He was a loose end. A potential future avenger. Nagato would have eliminated the threat. The thought was clinical, cold, and it came to his mind with terrifying ease. He pushed it away, horrified at himself. Congratulations, kid. Kurama's voice was a low, mournful whisper in his soul. You're one step closer to being just like them. You silenced a man's heart to protect a philosophy. Is this the peace you wanted? Naruto didn't answer. He just adjusted the weight of the unconscious man on his shoulder and kept walking, the red clouds on his back feeling heavier than any mountain. They arrived at the gates of Amigakure as the gray light was failing. Konan was there, a solitary figure waiting in the drizzle. Her expression was impassive as she looked at the captive slung over Naruto's shoulder. Report, she said. Target neutralized and captured. Kisame grunted. The new leader is effective. The word was chosen carefully, and Naruto knew it. It meant he got the job done, but it also hinted at the struggle Kisame had witnessed. Konan's gaze lingered on Naruto for a moment, searching his face, but his expression was a carefully constructed mask of apathy. Good, she said finally. Setsu has prepared an interrogation cell. Your first hunt is a success. Pain. The name didn't feel right. It felt like a costume he couldn't take off. Later that night, Naruto bypassed the throne room and went to the Spartan chamber he had claimed as his own. It was empty save for a bed and a small mirror. He stood before it, looking at his own reflection. The Akatsuki cloak hung on his frame, the red clouds like bloodstains against the night sky. The Gyoku ring on his thumb was a cold, heavy weight. His eyes, once bright with passion and laughter, were now shadowed and distant. He looked for the boy who had dreamed of being Hokage, the boy who had promised to save Sasuke, the boy who had won over a village with sheer, idiotic stubbornness. He couldn't find him. In his place stood a stranger with his face, a leader of monsters, a hunter of men. He had won his first victory for the Akatsuki, but the price had been a piece of his own soul, chipped away and left behind in a dusty cave in the land of earth. And he knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that there were many more pieces left to lose. The sound of Konohagakure was the sound of hammers on wood. It was the grating scrape of shovels against rubble, the strained shouts of foremen, and the rhythmic chant of men and women hauling timber. It was the sound of a village refusing to die. 2 months had passed since the sky had fallen. The great crater, the gaping wound left by Pain's Shinra Tensei, was no longer a symbol of despair but a massive, bustling construction site. The will of fire, it seemed, was most visible amidst the ashes. Under Tsunade's relentless direction, bolstered by Yamato's wood-style jutsu that churned out prefabricated structures with miraculous speed, a new Konoha was rising from the ruins. But the hammering could not drown out the silence. It was a silence that lived in the heart of every villager, a space hollowed out by their missing hero. Naruto Uzumaki. The official story, the one repeated in hushed tones over midday rations and whispered in the long nights at the temporary shelters, was one of heroic sacrifice. He had defeated the demigod who had destroyed their home, and in the ensuing chaos, he had been captured by the last remnants of the Akatsuki. He was a prisoner of war, a martyr waiting to be rescued. The story was a balm, a necessary fiction that allowed the village to focus on rebuilding instead of succumbing to the terrifying alternative. It was a story Sakura Haruno clung to with every fiber of her being. She moved through the crowded corridors of the temporary field hospital, a whirlwind of pink hair and green light. Her hands, glowing with medical ninjutsu, hovered over a young Chunin whose leg had been crushed by falling debris. The boy's whimpers quieted under her gentle, healing touch. There, she said, her voice soft but strained with fatigue. The bones are set. The tissue is regenerating. Just stay off it for a week. We need you back on your feet. Thank you, Sakura-sama. The boy mumbled, his eyes wide with a mixture of pain and awe. She offered him a weak smile and moved on to the next cot. This was her penance, her purpose. While Naruto was suffering in some dark Akatsuki prison, she would heal the village he had saved. She would make sure there was a home for him to return to. Every shinobi she healed, every civilian she treated, was a prayer for his safety. But at night, in the quiet of her small tent, the fiction would fray. The image of his battle, which she had witnessed from the sidelines, would return. The monstrous, six-tailed fox, a being of pure rage and chakra. The terrifying transformation back. The look on his face as he left to confront the real pain, a look of exhaustion and a terrible, lonely resolve. She would clutch the kunai knife he had once used, tracing the small imperfections on the hilt. You're coming home, Naruto, she would whisper into the darkness. We'll bring you home. I promise. It was a promise to him, but mostly, it was a promise to herself. Kakashi Hatake stood before the memorial stone, the polished black granite reflecting his masked face. The names carved into the stone were a litany of his failures. Obito Uchiha. Rin Noira. And now, at the bottom of a long mental list, he had carved another, Naruto Uzumaki. He hadn't added it to the stone. Not yet. To do so would be to accept the unacceptable. But in the quiet graveyard of his own heart, Naruto's name was already there, etched in gilt. He had been there. He had died, and been brought back by Nagato's final, inexplicable act of redemption. But he had been too weak. He had arrived too late to help Naruto in his greatest hour of need, just as he had been too late for Obito, too late for Rin, too late for Sasuke. He, the famed copy ninja, the student of the fourth Hokage, was cursed to be a spectator to the tragedies of those he cared for most. He had pored over the reports from the Toad's summons. Fukasaku had described Naruto's despair after the battle, his rage at Nagato. But the story ended there. The Toads had been dismissed, and when the Konoha shinobi had finally reached the paper tree, they had found only an empty shell. Nagato was gone. Konan was gone. And Naruto was gone. The logical conclusion was capture. It was the only conclusion that allowed Kakashi to sleep at night, however fitfully. The alternative, that Naruto had somehow been killed, was a darkness he refused to entertain. Sensei. Jiraiya-sama. He murmured to the unhearing stone. I'm sorry. I let him carry too much. We all did. The weight of Naruto's life had been a burden the entire village had placed on his young shoulders, and Kakashi, his teacher, had done little to alleviate it. He had taught him teamwork, the Chidori that he could never perfect, and a few platitudes. But had he ever truly tried to understand the crushing loneliness of being a Jinchuriki? The pain of being an orphan? He had seen a reflection of himself in Naruto's solitude, and instead of reaching out, he had retreated behind his book and his lazy excuses, perhaps because the boy's boisterous light was too bright, a painful reminder of the light he himself had lost. A rescue mission was already being planned. As soon as a viable intelligence lead emerged, he would lead it. He would not fail again. He would drag Naruto back from the brink, just as he had always failed to do with Sasuke. This time, he would be on time. In a reinforced concrete bunker deep beneath the rising framework of the new Hokage Tower, Shikamaru Nara stared at a map of the elemental nations. His father, Shikaku, stood beside him, arms crossed, a grim expression on his scarred face. The room was the heart of Konoha's new intelligence division, and it felt like a tomb. It's a strategic nightmare, Shikamaru said, his voice flat. The usual lazy drawl was gone, replaced by a clipped, anxious tension. He tapped a finger on the land of rain. Assuming he's being held there, Amagekure is a fortress. Nagato controlled it completely. We have to assume its defenses are still active. It's geographically isolated, difficult to infiltrate, and we have zero assets on the ground. Troublesome. Shikaku agreed, his gaze distant. But not impossible. The problem isn't just getting in. The problem is the package itself. Shikamaru knew exactly what he meant. Rescuing Naruto wasn't like rescuing a captured daimyo. Naruto was a living weapon of mass destruction. The Akatsuki wouldn't be keeping him in a simple cell. They would have him bound with the most powerful sealing jutsu imaginable. Breaking those seals to free him could be just as dangerous as leaving him there. One mistake, one miscalculation, and the Nine Tails could be unleashed, wiping out the rescue team and anyone else in the vicinity. We need a full suppression team, Shikamaru continued, his mind racing through the tactical variables. Yamato Taicho is essential. We need a sensory team with Byakugan and the Abdurame insects to scout, a heavy assault team. Choji, maybe Kiba. A medical ninja. Sakura. And a leader who can adapt on the fly. Kakashi-sensei. He was outlining the mission, trying to fit the pieces together, to solve the puzzle. What a drag, he muttered, rubbing the back of his neck. But the words were devoid of their usual meaning. This wasn't a troublesome chore. This was a terrifying, almost impossible task, and the fate of his friend, and perhaps the world, rested on him getting the calculations right. He felt a cold dread pool in his stomach. For the first time in his life, Shikamaru Nara was afraid he wasn't smart enough. The first crack in their collective, necessary fiction came not from a heroic scout or a decoded message, but from the damp, miserable confines of Konoha's interrogation unit. They had captured him during a skirmish on the border of the Land of Fire. An aimed shinobi, a low-level chunin named Kiri, caught trying to sabotage a supply line. He was unimportant, a nobody, but he was the first solid link to Amigekyo they'd had since the invasion. Ibiki Marino, his face a roadmap of scars and grim intent, had worked on him for 2 days. The man was tight-lipped, terrified, but Ibiki was a master of breaking minds, and Kiri's was not a particularly strong one. The final session took place in the deepest, most secure cell. The air was thick with the smell of sweat, fear, and antiseptic. This time, Ibiki was not alone. Danzo Shimura stood in the shadows, his bandaged face and cane a portrait of cold patience. He had taken a personal interest in this interrogation. The fall of Pain and the disappearance of the Jinchuriki were matters of the highest village security. "Let's try this again, Kiri," Ibiki said, his voice a low growl. "The Akatsuki leader, Pain, is dead. Your village is in chaos. Your loyalty is to a corpse. Tell me what happened to the Konoha Jinchuriki, Naruto Uzumaki, and I will see to it that you are treated humanely." Kiri, chained to a chair, spat a wad of bloody saliva onto the floor. "I know nothing. I serve AIM. I serve Pain-sama." Danzo stepped forward from the shadows, his one visible eye glittering with a cold, predatory light. "Your Pain-sama was a man from your village named Nagato. We know this. We also know that he is dead. Your loyalty is misplaced." He tapped his cane on the stone floor, the sound echoing in the oppressive silence. "However, your village does have a new leader. Doesn't it?" Kiri flinched. The reaction was subtle, but in this room, it was a thunderclap. Ibiki and Danzo exchanged a look. "Who?" Ibiki pressed, leaning in close. "Who is leading Amigekyo now?" The Aimnin's eyes darted around frantically. He was more afraid of this question than of any physical torture. "No one. There is no one." "A lie," Danzo stated calmly. He reached out with his cane and tapped Kiri's forehead. A faint pulse of chakra, almost imperceptible, flowed from the tip of the cane. A mind-probing jutsu, subtle and forbidden. Kiri's eyes glazed over for a split second. "The hero of the leaf!" Kiri began to mumble, his own will crumbling under the pressure from both within and without. They said the hero of the leaf. He was there. He was captured," Ibiki affirmed, trying to lead him. "He was taken prisoner after he defeated Nagato." Kiri began to tremble, a low, keening sound escaping his lips. It wasn't the sound of a man breaking under torture. It was the sound of a man terrified of a blasphemy he was about to speak. "No," he whispered. "No, not captured." Danzo's grip on his cane tightened. "Speak clearly." Kiri's head snapped up, his eyes wide with a manic terror, looking at something far beyond the walls of the cell. He is the new sky. The one who stopped the rain. He stood before us, with the angel, Konan-sama. He wears the red cloud cloak. He wears the ring. He is not a prisoner." The words hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. Ibiki stared, his scarred face for once showing utter shock. Danzo remained unnervingly still. "He is our new leader!" Kiri shrieked, the truth finally bursting out of him in a torrent of madness. "He inherited the will. He is the new Pain. Uzumaki Naruto is the new Pain." The dam of denial broke. The report, classified at the highest level, landed on Tsunade's desk with a heavy thud. She was in her temporary office, a large, drafty tent filled with maps and frantic aides. The rebuilding effort demanded her attention 24 hours a day. She had been subsisting on soldier pills and sake for weeks. "What is this, Shizen?" she asked, not looking up from a blueprint. It's from Ibiki-sama and Danzo-sama." Shizen's voice was trembling. "Hokage-sama, you need to read it." Tsunade sighed, annoyed, and picked up the scroll. Her eyes scanned the first few lines, detailing the capture and interrogation of the AIM Chunin. Then she reached the transcript of the confession. "Uzumaki Naruto is the new Pain." The world went silent. The sounds of hammering, the shouting, the rustling of papers, it all faded away into a deafening roar in her ears. She read the line again. And again. The kanji seemed to warp and twist, refusing to make sense. It was a lie. A trick. A desperate gambit by a broken prisoner. It had to be. She looked up at Shizen, expecting her to be shaking her head, to be saying it was unconfirmed, impossible. But Shizen was pale, her eyes filled with a horrified certainty. She looked at the two Umbu guards standing silently in the corner. Their chakra was a maelstrom of shock and disbelief. This was real. This was the truth. The scroll slipped from her fingers. It fell to the floor, coiling like a dead snake. Naruto. Her Naruto. The loud-mouthed, knuckle-headed brat who had inherited the will of her foolish teammate, and the face of her heroic student. The boy she had bet everything on. The one who had mastered the Rasengan, learned Sage Mode, and saved her from herself. The boy who wore her brother's necklace, the last memento of her lost hope. He hadn't been captured. He hadn't been killed. He had left. He had chosen them. He had chosen the path of the man who had murdered their master and destroyed their home. He had looked at the devastation, at the bodies of his comrades, at the village he had sworn to protect, and he had chosen to walk away. A tremor started in her hand. It traveled up her arm, shaking her entire body. The legendary Sannin, the Slug Princess, the fifth Hokage, began to tremble like a leaf in a storm. "No!" she whispered. The word was a puff of air, a denial against the hurricane of truth. "No!" The roar tore from her throat, a sound of pure, primal agony. It was the cry of a gambler who had just lost her final, most desperate wager. With a sweep of her arm, she sent everything on her desk, maps, scrolls, inkwells, sake bottles, crashing to the floor. The sound of shattering glass barely registered over the ringing in her ears. Her legendary strength, the power that could shatter mountains, turned inwards. It felt like her own muscles were tearing themselves apart, like her own heart was being crushed in an invisible fist. Nawaki. Her brother's smiling face, vowing to become Hokage. Gone. Dan. Her lover's gentle smile, vowing to protect the village. Gone. Jiraiya. Her best friend's foolish grin, vowing to find the path to peace. Gone. And now Naruto. He wasn't gone. He was worse than gone. He was lost. He had taken all their dreams, all their hopes, all their wills, and he had thrown them onto a bonfire, choosing to warm his hands by the flames. The strength left her legs. Tsunade, the Godame Hokage, stumbled back, her hand clutching her chest as if to hold her breaking heart together. She fell into her chair, which groaned under the sudden impact. She stared at nothing, her eyes, once so fiery and defiant, now vacant and shattered. She had failed. As a mentor, as a leader, as the last of her generation. She had failed Jiraiya. She had failed Minato and Kushina. She had failed Naruto. A single, crystalline tear traced a path through the grime on her cheek. Then another. The dam of her iron will, eroded by a lifetime of loss, finally gave way. Shizen rushed to her side, but Tsunade didn't see her. She was drowning in a sea of failure, and the last light of hope had just been extinguished. The news spread, not like a wildfire, but like a poison seeping into the groundwater. It was a state secret, but secrets have a way of escaping in a village of shinobi trained to listen and observe. An Umbu's loose whisper to his wife. A council member's grim expression. A change in the planning for the rescue mission. The village, already wounded, felt the infection of this new, terrible truth. Kakashi was in the archives, poring over old texts about the Akatsuki, when Sakura found him. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed but burning with a terrifying, dry fire. She didn't speak. She simply handed him a copy of the report, procured by means he didn't want to ask. He read it. His one visible eye widened, then narrowed into a slit of profound pain. The scroll fell from his limp hand. The memorial stone had been a lie. Naruto wasn't a hero to be mourned. He was a traitor to be feared. The parallel was so hideously perfect it made him want to vomit. Obito had been lost to the darkness after seeing Rin die. Sasuke had been lost after learning the truth of Itachi. And now Naruto, after seeing his village destroyed, his friends fall, his master die, he too had succumbed. It was a pattern, a curse woven into the very fabric of Team Minato, and its legacy. "It's my fault," Kakashi whispered, his voice hoarse. He sank down, leaning against a dusty bookshelf, his head in his hands. "I should have seen it. The darkness in him. It was always there, the hatred for the villagers who ostracized him. The loneliness. I saw it, and I did nothing. I thought his smile was enough. I thought Jiraiya-sama's training was enough." Sakura didn't offer words of comfort. There were none. She knelt in front of him, her hands clenched into fists in her lap. "Is this how you felt?" she asked, her voice dangerously quiet. "When Sasuke left? This hollow feeling? Like you've been carved out from the inside?" Kakashi looked up, and for the first time, Sakura saw the full, crushing weight of his guilt. "Yes," he said simply. "I was a fool," she continued, her voice gaining a hard, brittle edge. "I cried. I begged you and him to bring Sasuke back. I was useless. I just waited. I'm not going to be useless again." She looked at her own hands, the hands that could heal and the hands that could shatter rock. "When we went after Sasuke, I didn't have the strength to stop him. I do now." Her tears had run dry. In their place was a terrifying resolve. "He's sick, Sensei. The Naruto we know wouldn't do this. He's been manipulated, brainwashed. His mind has been poisoned, and I am a medical ninja. It's my job to cure poison." Her eyes met his, and they were no longer the eyes of a love-lorn girl. They were the eyes of a warrior. "I will bring him back, even if I have to break every bone in his body and drag his unconscious form back to this village. I will save him from himself." Kakashi saw in her a reflection of his own desperate need for redemption. "The mission is no longer a rescue, Sakura," he said, his voice regaining a sliver of its command. "It's a retrieval. A recovery, of the highest possible difficulty." He would not fail a third time. Shikamaru stood with his father on the roof of the Nara clan compound, watching the stars begin to appear in the twilight sky. He had just come from the council meeting. He had seen Tsunade's empty eyes. He had heard Danzo's chillingly logical proposal. "So," Shikaka said, breaking the silence. "He's the new leader. He's the new pain," Shikamaru corrected, the title tasting like acid. "It's strategic genius. Of the worst possible kind." His mind, which usually moved like a lazy river, was now a raging torrent. He began to list the points out loud, trying to build a cage of logic around the monster that had once been his friend. 1. Power. Sage mode. The Nine-Tails chakra, which he is learning to control. The Raisin Shuriken. Mass shadow clones. He's an S-rank threat on his own, a one-man army. Now he has the rest of the Akatsuki's resources at his command. 2. Knowledge. He knows this village inside and out. Our defenses, our protocols, our blind spots. He knows our chain of command. He knows our key personnel and their psychological weaknesses. He knows Sakura's devotion, Kakashi-sensei's guilt, my tactical patterns, Choji's loyalty, Kiba's impulsiveness. He can exploit every single one of our bonds. 3. Ideology. This was the part that terrified Shikamaru the most. He's not just a monster seeking destruction. He has a philosophy, a twisted one, but a compelling one. Nagato's ideal of forced peace through overwhelming pain. To a world full of small, broken nations constantly trampled by the great powers, Naruto isn't a villain. He's a savior. A god who can protect them. He won't just command an organization of S-rank criminals. He could command the loyalty of entire countries. He stopped, breathing heavily. He's not the next Madara. He's the next Hashirama, but fighting for the other side. A charismatic unifier with the power of a tailed beast, but his goal isn't to build a village, it's to hold the entire world hostage. He finally slumped down, the weight of his own analysis crushing him. "What a drag," he whispered, and this time the words were filled with a despair so profound it was almost absolute. "How do you fight that? How do you fight your friend when he's become a god?" The final nail in the coffin of the old Konoha was hammered in at an emergency meeting of the village council and the Jonin commander. Tsunade was present, but she was a ghost, her eyes vacant. Danzo Shimura stood before them all, his cane tapping a slow, deliberate rhythm on the floor. "The Godame is unwell," he began, his voice devoid of sympathy. "This is understandable. She placed a great deal of faith in the Jinchuriki. A faith that has been spectacularly betrayed, but we do not have the luxury of grief. We face the single greatest threat in this village's history. Not an external enemy, but one of our own. Our ultimate weapon has been turned against us, and it is being aimed at our throat by a hand that knows our every weakness." He let the fear settle in the room. "Tsunadeheim's leadership, while valiant, has been defined by sentiment. She bet on Jiraiya, and he was lost. She bet on Naruto Uzumaki, and he has become our greatest enemy. We can no longer afford to gamble with the fate of this village. We require a leader who is not swayed by emotion. A leader who understands the reality of the shadows we live in. A leader who is willing to make the hard, unpleasant choices necessary for our survival." His gaze swept across the room, cold and unwavering. "The rescue mission is a sentimental fool's errand. We cannot save Naruto Uzumaki. He is a Class X threat, a nuke of the highest order. He must be eliminated. For the good of the leaf. For the good of the world." He let his words hang in the air. "In this time of crisis, Konoha needs a firm hand. A root to hold it steady when the leaf is being battered by the storm. I am willing to provide that stability. I am prepared to assume the responsibilities of Hokage until this crisis is averted." It was a coup, bloodless and brilliant, executed not with a kunai, but with the poison of truth and fear. The council, terrified, saw the logic. The Jonin, seeing their own leader broken, saw the necessity. The motion was passed. As Danzo was declared acting sixth Hokage, a new, colder wind blew through the alleys of the Hidden Leaf Village. The sound of hammers faltered, replaced by the hushed, fearful whispers of a village that had just realized its lost son was not a martyr. He was the apocalypse. The land of iron was a world painted in monochrome. Heavy, gray-bellied clouds hung low over jagged, snow-dusted peaks, and the air was so cold it felt sharp in the lungs. Here, there was no will of fire, no boisterous shinobi spirit. There was only the cold, unyielding discipline of the samurai, a culture of steel, honor, and silence. It was the perfect, sterile environment for a summit that was less about diplomacy and more about the dissection of a dying world. Naruto stood on a snow-covered ridge overlooking the frosted valley where the meeting was to take place. The wind whipped at his Akatsuki cloak, the red clouds a stark, bloody violation against the white landscape. He was flanked by Konan, a silent, graceful shadow, and Kisame, a hulking mass of blue-skinned menace whose predatory grin seemed to be the only warm thing for miles. Samahata wriggled in its bandages, its chakra-sensitive nature agitated by the confluence of powerful entities gathering below. This was his debut on the world stage, not as a hero, but as a king of a rogue state and the leader of the world's most wanted criminals. He felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach, a sensation he ruthlessly suppressed. Pain felt no anxiety. Pain was the cause of it in others. "The 5 Kage," Konan said, her voice a low murmur against the wind. "The Reikage, the Tsuchikage, the Mizukage, your new Hokage, and the Kazekage. They are all here." Naruto's eyes narrowed at the mention of the Kazekage. Gaara. His first real bond outside of Team 7. The friend he had pulled back from the brink of the darkness he himself had now embraced. The thought was a shard of glass in his heart. He pushed it deeper, letting the pain fuel his resolve. "Tobi and Zetsu are in position," Kisame rumbled, his voice full of eager anticipation. "They say the Uchiha brat is on his way as well. This is going to be quite the party. The Uchiha is a secondary objective," Naruto stated, his voice flat and authoritative, projecting a calm he did not feel. "Our purpose here is to make a declaration. The era of the 5 great nations dictating the fate of the world is over. A new power has risen. They will listen, or they will be made to." He began to walk down the ridge, his boots crunching in the snow. He wasn't sneaking in. He was arriving. Inside the meeting hall, the atmosphere was already thick with tension. The 4 Kage, the 4th Reikage, Inoki, the 3rd Tsuchikage, Meitarumi, the 5th Mizukage, and Gaara, the 5th Kazekage, sat opposite Danzo Shimura, the acting 6th Hokage. They were separated by a low, U-shaped table, with the neutral General Mifune of the Land of Iron presiding over them all. The first matter of business. The Raikage's voice boomed, making the teacups on the table vibrate. Is the Akatsuki? They attacked my village, captured my brother, the Jinchuriki of the Eight Tails, and you, Hokage, did nothing. He slammed a massive, gauntlet fist on the table, cracking the wood. Danzo, his face a mask of cold indifference, didn't flinch. The Akatsuki attacked my village first, Raikage Dano. We were preoccupied. And the matter of Sasuke Uchiha is an internal Konoha affair, an affair that has left a scar on my village and my brother. I roared. This bickering is pointless. Inoki, the diminutive Tsuchikage, piped up from his seat, his voice creaky with age. The Akatsuki is a threat to us all, but the intelligence from Konoha suggests a far more disturbing development. A change in their leadership. He looked directly at Danzo. Your reports claim the Nine Tails Jinchuriki, Naruto Uzumaki, was not captured. They claim he has willingly taken command. The accusation hung in the air. Mei Terumi's beautiful face was etched with concern. We have heard similar whispers. A boy hailed as a hero, it seems unbelievable. It was Gaara who spoke next, his voice quiet but carrying an immense weight that cut through the tension. It cannot be true. He looked at Danzo, his seafoam green eyes, devoid of their old madness, now filled with a desperate, pleading hope. Naruto Uzumaki saved my life. He saved my village. He taught me what it means to fight for others. He could not betray everything he stands for. Before Danzo could offer a chilling confirmation, the main doors of the hall slid open with a heavy groan. 3 figures stood silhouetted against the stark white snow outside. The samurai guards tensed, their hands flying to the hilts of their katanas. Naruto stepped forward into the light, flanked by his angel of God and the monster of the mist. He wore his Akatsuki cloak like a royal mantle, the ring on his thumb glinting in the dim light. His face was a cold, impassive mask, his blue eyes holding none of their former warmth. They were the eyes of a glacier. A collective gasp went through the hall. The Kage stared, utterly stunned into silence. Naruto! Gaara whispered, his voice cracking. He stood up, his face a portrait of horrified disbelief. This was not the boy he knew. This was a chilling effigy, a hollowed-out mockery of his friend. Uzumaki! The Raikage roared, leaping to his feet, blue lightning crackling around his body. You dare show your face here? Naruto ignored him. He walked slowly, deliberately, into the center of the room, his gaze sweeping over the assembled leaders. He stopped before the table, a king addressing a council of lesser lords. I am not Naruto Uzumaki, he said, his voice cold and resonant. It was the voice of pain. That name belongs to a foolish child who believed in a failed system. I am the leader of Amigekure and the acting commander of the Akatsuki. You may call me Pain. Blasphemy! Inoki rasped, his old eyes wide. You're just a boy playing dress-up in a dead man's cloak, a boy who defeated the man you all feared. Naruto countered, his gaze finally settling on Gaara. For a fraction of a second, the icy mask wavered. He saw the genuine pain in his friend's eyes, the desperate plea. It was a dagger to his heart. He twisted it. The boy you knew died in the crater of Konoha, Gaara. He died watching his home burn, his master's ideals turn to ash, and his friends proved powerless. He died realizing that your way, the way of trust and bonds, is a path to suffering. What was born from that ash is the world's salvation. Gaara flinched as if struck. Sand began to trickle from the gourd on his back, pooling around his feet. This isn't you, Naruto. You're being manipulated. Let us help you. Help me? Naruto laughed, a short, bitter, humorless sound. You are the ones who need help. You sit here, the leaders of the great nations, bickering over petty slights and old grudges while the world bleeds. You are the disease. Your endless cycle of hatred, your wars for land and power, your willingness to sacrifice your own people for the greater good, it is a cancer. I am the cure. He spread his arms wide, a gesture of grand, terrifying proclamation. The Akatsuki's original goal was to use the tailed beast to create a weapon of ultimate deterrence. A noble idea, but flawed. A weapon can be seized, copied, or surpassed. The world does not need a new weapon. It needs a new God. A single, absolute authority with the power to enforce peace. I will gather the remaining bijou, and I will become that authority. Wars will end. Hatred will be suppressed. Any nation, any village, that dares to raise a hand against another will be met with a pain so swift and so total that the very thought of conflict will become extinct. I am not here to negotiate. I am here to inform you of the new world order. The sheer, unadulterated arrogance of the declaration was breathtaking. The wreckage was vibrating with rage, ready to explode. Anoki was pale with fury. Mei's expression had hardened into one of grim resolve. Only Danzo looked on with a cold, analytical curiosity, as if observing a fascinating but dangerous new specimen. "You are insane, Uzumaki!" the wreckage bellowed. "You are a traitor and a terrorist! I will pass judgment on you myself." He was about to launch himself across the room when a swirling vortex appeared in the center of the table. White Setsu's head popped out, a grotesque jack-in-the-box. "Hi everyone!" it chirped cheerfully. "Sorry to interrupt, but Sasuke is here. And he's looking for a fight." The tension in the room snapped. All eyes turned to Zetsu. "Where is he?" the wreckage demanded. "Right behind you." Zetsu giggled, before sinking back into the floor. Chaos erupted. Sasuke Uchiha dropped from the ceiling, his Chidori screaming like a banshee. The wreckage, abandoning Naruto for the more immediate threat, met him head-on. The room exploded in a clash of lightning and steel. Samurai flooded in, only to be met by a grinning Kisame. "Let's have a little fun, shall we?" he roared, swinging Samehada and unleashing a massive wave of water that sent the samurai scrambling. Konan's body dissolved into 1,000 paper butterflies, creating a swirling, defensive storm around Naruto, deflecting stray kunai and the shrapnel from the Kage's battle. Naruto didn't move. He simply stood in the eye of the storm, observing. He watched Sasuke, a whirlwind of black fire and lightning, move with a speed and grace that was breathtaking. He saw the Mangekyo Sharingan, spinning with rage and grief, unleash the black flames of Amaterasu. He saw the skeletal ribs of the Susanoo begin to form, a divine armor born from absolute despair. He saw in Sasuke the perfect, concentrated embodiment of the world's sickness. A single soul, so twisted by the failures of the shinobi system that he had become a natural disaster. His hatred was pure, focused, and powerful. It was a resource. As the battle raged, the wreckage sacrificing an arm to get a blow on Sasuke and Gaara's sand intervening to save his fellow Kage, Naruto made a decision. Sasuke's path of simple destruction was a waste. That fire needed to be aimed. "Tobi!" Naruto spoke into the chaos, his voice quiet but firm. A swirling vortex appeared beside him. "Yes, Leader-sama?" The masked man's childish voice piped up, comically out of place. "Get him out of here," Naruto commanded. "And bring him to me. It's time for a reunion. Tobi is on it." The vortex swirled around Naruto and Konan, and in a nauseating twist of space, the chaos of the summit hall vanished. They reappeared in a desolate, frozen ruin. The skeletal remains of a great bridge stood nearby, its pillars shattered and coated in ice. The wind howled, carrying flurries of snow. It was a place where things came to die. A moment later, another vortex deposited Sasuke and his team, the brash, water-loving Suigetsu, the sensory ninja Karen, and the stoic, powerful Yugo, onto the frozen ground. Sasuke was breathing heavily, his Susanoo fading, blood dripping from his eye. He stumbled, caught by the hulking Yugo. "Sasuke, your chakra is a mess. You pushed yourself too far," Karen yelled, her face a mask of worry. "What the hell?" Suigetsu grumbled, looking around at the bleak landscape and then at Naruto. "Great, another weirdo in a black cloak. Who's this guy?" Sasuke's eyes, one bleeding, focused on the figure standing before him. The blonde hair. The Akatsuki cloak. The cold, familiar chakra signature now twisted into something alien and wrong. "Naruto?" The name was a breath of disbelief. "It's been a long time, Sasuke," Naruto said. There was no warmth in his greeting, no trace of their shared history. It was the greeting of a strategist assessing a new piece on the board. The last time they had seen each other was in the wreck of Orochimaru's hideout. Naruto had been begging him to come home. Now they stood as equals, two S-rank criminals, two traitors to the leaf. Sasuke straightened up, shrugging off Yugo's support. His Sharingan spun, analyzing, dissecting. What is this? What are you doing here, wearing that cloak? I heard you were captured. The rumors of my capture were a misinterpretation, Naruto said calmly. I am the new leader of the Akatsuki, Karen gasped. Sujetsu's jaw dropped, and even Yugo's placid face registered shock. Sasuke's expression, however, simply hardened. I see, he said, his voice laced with a dark, cynical understanding. So even you, the great idealist, finally realized what a sham Konoha is. I realize the entire world is a sham, Naruto corrected. Konoha is just its most prominent symptom. Which brings me to you. I watched you fight. Your hatred is magnificent. It's a pure, powerful force, but your goal is small. Sasuke's eyes narrowed dangerously. Small? I will avenge my brother. I will burn Konoha to the ground for what they did to the Uchiha clan. There is nothing small about my vengeance. And then what? Naruto asked, taking a step forward. You razed the village. You killed Danzo. You killed the elders. And what will you have achieved? You'll be the last Uchiha, standing on a pile of ashes, just as alone as you were before. Will that bring Itachi back? Will it undo the massacre? No. It's a child's tantrum, Sasuke. A glorious, world-shaking tantrum, but a tantrum nonetheless. You dare! Sasuke growled, the ribs of his Susanoo flaring to life around him again. I do, Naruto said, unflinching. He held up a hand, not to fight, but to placate. Your hatred is not the problem, Sasuke. It's the target that's wrong. You want to destroy the symptom. I want to destroy the disease. He began to walk a slow circle around Sasuke, like a predator inspecting its prey. Think about it. Why was the Uchiha clan massacred? Because their power was feared, because Danzo and the elders saw them as a threat to the village's stability. They made a cold, pragmatic choice in the name of peace. They sacrificed your entire family to prevent a civil war. It's the same broken logic that has governed this world for centuries. He stopped directly in front of Sasuke, their faces only a few feet apart. You want to destroy Konoha? I want to control it. I want to control everything. I will build a new world order, under my singular authority. A world where a leader like Danzo would never have the power to make such an order. A world where a clan's power is not a threat to be eliminated, but a resource to be managed. A world where a tragedy like the Uchiha massacre would be impossible. He let the words sink in. He was not appealing to their friendship. He was appealing to Sasuke's logic, to the core of his pain. Your revenge is a single act. My revolution is an eternal state. Naruto continued, his voice a hypnotic, compelling whisper. Your plan ends with ashes. My plan ends with a new world built in our image, a world run by those who have truly known pain, and have the strength to wield it. Sasuke was silent, his Mangekyo staring into Naruto's cold blue eyes. The Susanoo ribs receded. His rage was still a furnace in his chest, but Naruto's words were like a blueprint, showing him how to forge that rage into something more than a simple weapon of destruction. And what do you want from me? Sasuke finally asked, his voice low. An alliance, Naruto said simply. You are the last Uchiha. I am the last Uzumaki Jinchuriki. They made us into monsters, Sasuke. Pariahs. Outcasts. Let's give them the monsters they deserve. Together, we are the two most powerful shinobi of our generation. The world that wronged us will either bow to us, or it will break before us. He extended a hand. Not in friendship, but in contract. Join me. Help me capture the remaining tailed beasts. With their power, my plan will become a reality. And in return, the full resources of the Akatsuki will be at your disposal. We will hunt down Danzo Shimura. I will not just let you kill him. I will deliver him to you, bound and helpless. You will have your revenge. But it will not be the end. It will be the beginning, the first official act of our new world order. It was a masterful temptation. It offered Sasuke everything he wanted, his revenge, and something more he hadn't even considered, a purpose beyond that revenge. It validated his hatred, framing it not as a destructive impulse, but as a righteous catalyst for change. Karen looked horrified. Sasuke-kun, you can't be serious! This is Naruto! He's… She trailed off, unsure of what he was anymore. Suigetsu just grinned. Well, this just got interesting. An army of S-rank freaks to help us? I'm in. Yugo simply watched Sasuke, his loyalty absolute. Sasuke stared at Naruto's outstretched hand. He looked past Naruto to the gray, weeping sky. He thought of Itachi's life, sacrifice for a village that had then branded him a traitor. He thought of his parents, his clan, all dead for a peace that was a lie. Naruto was right. Destroying Konoha was an ending. But this was a chance to remake the entire game, to create a world where the sacrifices of the Uchiha clan would have been not only unnecessary but unthinkable. His own hand, clad in a black glove, came up and grasped Naruto's. The handshake was firm, cold, and devoid of any warmth. It was the sealing of a pact between two fallen angels, an alliance, Sasuke confirmed, his voice a low hiss of anticipation. We will help you hunt your beasts. And you will deliver Danzo to me. Naruto's lips curled into the faintest sliver of a smile. It was a cold, predatory expression that did not reach his eyes. It's a deal. He released Sasuke's hand and turned to face the desolate landscape. The pariah and the avenger, side by side. Toby watched from a distance, a silent, swirling vortex of glee. His two ultimate pawns, united under a single, false banner. The Eye of the Moon plan had never been closer. Our first target, Naruto said, his gaze turning towards the distant, thunderous clouds of the Land of Lightning, is the one that got away. Your Sharingan will be useful in tracking him. We're going to pay another visit to the Eight Tails. Sasuke's Mangekyo spun, a crimson pinwheel of death against the white snow. Good. I have a score to settle with him anyway. They stood together, two boys who had once promised to be the best of friends, now united as the world's most terrifying threat. The bond between them had not been reforged. It had been weaponized, and the world was about to feel its edge.